audience for staying to listen to a really engaging, really expert panel that's going to speak to us now on how we can enable learning environments, make them safer, make them more respectful to the people that we engage with and to the people that we work for. It's a really, I don't know what to say really. It's such a dignity. There are such important people sitting on this dais that, as you can see, I'm totally speechless and a little bit in awe. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here. It's wonderful to introduce the moderator for this session, Ingrid Srinath. Ingrid has been the head of CRY, the CEO of CRY. She's been Secretary General at Civicus, and right now she heads Childline in India, which is the singular service that reaches out across the country to enable children to call for help when they need to, and does a whole lot of other work as well. It's too good an opportunity not to say a few other things about Ingrid. I don't know if she realizes how she influences those she works with. So she was my first CEO when I worked in the development sector, when I worked in CRY. She has a way of setting standards of respect for stakeholders, which is completely unique. Ingrid, thanks so much for being here, and we will review a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you. It's entirely my pleasure to be here. Extremely grateful to have this opportunity, but most importantly, really grateful to be able to share this dais with this gang of luminaries. I'm going to, no words of introduction I say will completely do justice to their CV, so I'm just going to give you the highlights in the sense of who you have in front of you. To my extreme left is Rachel Wambui Mutoka, who's Executive Director of Moving the Goalposts, Kilifi, from Kenya. Apart from being an advocate at the High Court of Kenya with over 7 years experience, she's then got a master in international legal studies, a certificate in human rights, and currently, as I said, is Executive Director at Moving the Goalposts, Kilifi, Kenya. To her right is Nachawi Wadman, who's Program Manager, Life Skills Development from Right to Play in Thailand. Nachawi has been with Right to Play, joined fairly recently, just last year, but she has a wealth of experience of working with children, youth, disadvantaged families, the marginalized in a number of different organizations and programs in the US as well as in Thailand. To Nachawi's right is Poonam Sati, who is the International Development Advisor, UK Sport. That's a fairly recent appointment, but again, she's just connected, has experience with organizations around the world. So she's done work with organizations in Zambia, in Kenya, in India, in Mozambique, and primarily focused, of course, on excluded and vulnerable children and young people. To my right is a lady who hardly needs any introduction in this country, but nonetheless, let me say that Professor Shanta Sinha, many of you will know her from her most recent role, which was as the founder, chairperson of the National Commission for the Protection of Children's Rights in India. But before that, she was a luminary long before she got appointed to that role as founder of MV Foundation, the model for addressing child labor that she pioneered in Andhra Pradesh has become in many ways the template that got adopted around the country and in many parts of the world. She's also a recipient of the Max Essay Award. To Shanta's right is Begur, let me get this right, Begur Ramchandra Rao, who's education specialist at UNICEF here in India. He's been with UNICEF for over 10 years, has a PhD in education, and works in children's rights program very closely with the government of India, as well as with state governments, particularly focused on implementing the right to education. And last but by no means least is Maria Bobenreith, who is Executive Director of Women Win. Maria, again, is this truly global person. She tells me one parent is Chilean, one is Italian. She was born in Chile, raised in the US, now lives in Amsterdam, works around the world. Before she joined Women Win, she was with Nike in a number of different capacities, but her last role there was as Global Director of Community Investments, and there she helped really spin off or start or support the founding of Women Win, was their first chair, and is now the Executive Director. So as you can see, that's quite a weighty panel. But you will be relieved to know we're not going to spend the next 90 minutes talking at you. We're going to try and limit our own speech making to 5 or 6 minutes each, so that we have as much time as possible to engage with you. With that, let me start with Shanta Sinha. Shanta, you've, as I said, really seen this problem from many different sides. As a country, and we're not alone in this regard, we're seeing such a surge in violence against children, violence by children, violence around children. What do you think, if at all, are we doing right? What do we need to do differently based on your enormous experience?
Thank you, Ingrid and friends. I thought I will focus on a very, very macro issue, because there are so many who will do the detailing about violence on children, and I would pin it on attitudes and mindsets which in fact cause so much of violence on children. The violence on children could be at 3 levels. One is, of course, the physical violence and abuse. The second would be the emotional violence, the psychological violence. And the third is the structural violence. In fact, the lack of infrastructure, lack of facilities, lack of investments in children and their protection and their rights is indeed, I think, as important as having other forms of violence as physical and emotional violence. And you find that this violence is in all spaces. Normally one does not speak of violence on children in the family. And when I was in the commission, as an ombudsperson for protection of children's rights in the country, one would think of a space in the family also as being very, very violent on children. Other than that, it is the school, it's the institutions, and it's the workplace where children should not be at all. And that is also simply appalling. I think the reason for such violence is that one did not, or one does not perceive, this is where the perception comes, children as same and equal as adults. While one does not tolerate one adult beating up the other adult, one does not tolerate an adult scolding another adult or raising a voice against another adult. It still seems very normal that an adult can beat up a child, an adult can insult a child, an adult can humiliate a child, can scold a child, and I think that is where the crux of the problem is, that children are not seen as equal to adults. A teacher thinks the children is less than the teacher. The physical training teacher especially thinks the sports teacher in the country are really the most violent of all the cases that I've heard, and they think that they can really hit the child for no reason at all, just for the fun of it, for the heck of it. You also pinch the child on the cheek for the heck of it in our country, and that is so violent. It may be with full of love and fondness, but then it does pain, and children cannot just even hit back. So in a sense, I think it is tolerance of violence, tolerance of unequal relationship between the adult and the child, which causes all that we are talking about. And what we are bargaining for is equality. Equality and dignity for the child. It's just not enough to give a child a chocolate and an ice cream and then say that I love you. I think you will have to tell the child, I respect you. And that's very, very important. And what one is asking for is respect a child as much as you respect. Begur, would you like to be hit like this? See? But then if I spank a child, that is normal. If I hit him, it's very abnormal. And that is what one is talking about. You cannot do it. You must not do it. I mean, just because we don't have those capacities to deal with the child as equals, we get away with being violent on the child. We have to, as adults, build capacities to take care of children as equals and treat him just as how I would treat Begur. That's all. And I think that is important. The other thing, just two more and I'll give a chance to the rest, is that we were talking before coming here, and I think some of my friends are going to elaborate on it, that there has to be integral to this a child protection policy, which again looks at dignity and freedom of the child. And also give children a voice. One is not saying, I mean this is there in the UN Convention of Rights of Child, one is saying while we give children a voice, you must always invest in the child's capacities to evolve, and that is very much important. And also to bring child to the center stage of our country's policies and see that the child is integrated in every policy that the country makes. Somewhere that has not happened, and we have to, even when it is about rural development, what is there for the child? For every policy, what is there for the child? I think the feminists and the women's movement have done enough to mainstream, at least on paper, in policy, women's issues and policies. But we have not done enough for children and children's issues to integrate it. Somewhere there is still a patronizing kind of a element as far as child policies are concerned, and a kind of saying that we are doing children a great favor. Our countries, most of our countries, do not care enough for children, and we will have to get our systems to invest a lot more than what they are doing. Lots more. There are just not enough investments on children. And finally, I think the system also must learn how to work with civil society as equal partners, not as donors and donees, most governments' partnerships are so unequal. As unequal as adult and child partnership, the partnership between government and child NGOs are also so unequal. And I think we need to bargain for equal partnership. We are as important as the government is. And we are playing our roles. I'm sure Ingrid knows how important Childline is, and that she is also demanding for equality with the system she's working, that we are both equal. Just as how adult and child are equal, civil society and government is also equal, and we demand for equality just because we demand for equality for children. This is all I have to say. Thank you.
The Childline is kind of lucky and unique to have this public-private partnership type arrangement with the government, which gives us a much higher degree of leverage than most NGOs that work with government. But it's still a struggle with each individual bureaucrat to get them to understand this, because it's not a system they're used to working in. Rachel, if I can go to you, is the situation different in Kenya? And what can you tell us from your experience that could move this discussion along?
Thank you very much. And to be honest, the situation is just the same. It's just as sad, and the same cases that you're dealing with here in India and in many other countries around the world. We see that the children that we're working with who are engaged in these sports for development programs that we are managing are living in environments where they're facing a lot of challenges to their physical health, to their physical well-being, and to just be able to, and for us, we have a role to be able, as much as we're spending time and energy on these children, we have to reinforce the safeguarding work that we're doing. And maybe just to give a bit more background about our organization. So as she mentioned, I'm the executive director moving the goalpost Kilifi, and we are a football organization, and we run football leagues in Kilifi, which is in rural Kenya. Last year we worked with over 4,000 girls, and what we do is we gather them into this football program, and what that does is that it gives us an opportunity to give them leadership skills, sexual and reproductive health information. We do an education and health program, and for us the football is the crux of everything else that we do with these girls. And one of the things that we realize is that through our programming, we are probably one of the few chances, the opportunities that the girls that we work with get to know what their rights are. That is not right for someone to smack them. That is not right for someone to hit them over the head. That is usually the first interaction with this knowledge. And so we see our role as being very important and an important source of information and courage for these girls that we work with. But then, so to reinforce this, we've come up with a child protection policy. We have a child protection policy in place. And this policy also sets out the systems through which the policy should be implemented, including the forms that are used, the procedure for reporting, and all the logistics that goes into that. And so we have program officers, and part of the implementation of the policy has been to ensure that people are trained, from our program officers, the rest of our staff, all the way to our partners who we must inform that we have this policy, and who then are aware that we have a policy that's in place to secure these girls. And the documentation part of it is not just to say this and this happened on this day, but it's also a source of data. Because one of the things that we all know is that in all our countries we struggle with getting a database that says this is the situation, these are the challenges, these are the cases, what types of abuse is common. We can be a source of information, not just for ourselves, but also for other people who are implementing in this area. And for us, that's a really important product and something that we hope to be able to provide for other people who are working in this field. But I think for me, and this is, I was really going fast on those parts so that I can come to the crux of the matter for me, is that safeguarding is about encouraging the girls themselves to be advocates for themselves. We can put the best systems in place. You can have a wonderful policy, I can create all the forms, I can ensure that all the staff are following it, but unless we create an environment where that 9-year-old girl is going to be able to walk up to someone and say, he hit me, or she did this to me, or she's yelling at me and that's wrong, unless she has the agency to be her own advocate, then, all this is just forms and policies and it doesn't have an impact on the ground. So if we're talking about the impact of the work that we do, and impact from a child protection policy is to say that we create an environment where those children will be able to be their own advocate. But how do you create that environment? And a lot of it can go into leadership skills, leadership development. I know a lot of us are working with reinforcing self-esteem, positive self-image, and that's critical. But then it's also, do you give them a chance to participate in those processes? So for us, part of it comes through the democratic process through which we run these football fields. So we have over 110 fields running throughout Kilifi. And what we do is once we set up a football field in a specific location, we will gather the girls will register. But from that time on, all we do is support. They have to elect their leaders. They have to go through a process of selection. They are the ones who, and then we give them what the rules and regulations of the field are, but then they are the ones who enforce them. So they get used to start saying, no, the rule book says this, why are we doing this? Oh no, our team, the minimum number of players for a football match to be valid is 7. So if we're 6 of us, we're breaking the rules. This is not valid. Okay, we have to go and find an extra player. So for them to start interacting with regulations and to be aware that they have a say, that they have enough information that they can take that and be agents and to be, to participate actively. And I think that's important. So that as much as it's good for us to say we have safeguarding policies and we're protecting them, it's never going to be enough unless we can give the children themselves the agency and the power to be advocates for themselves. But beyond that is that this requires reinforcement. So if you've gone and you've told a girl that these are her rights, if this happens to her, it's wrong and this is illegal, what do you do at the point where she reports? So that reinforces the belief and the system. And of course, you know how children are. They know they fit within a society and they tell their friends everything that happens to they share with their friends a lot of things that happen to them. And so if one child, something happens to her and you're responsive, and you put in, they see that the child protection policy and the promises that you made and that the report was taken further, what that does is that the next time it happens, her friend will be, if it happens to her friend, then she will have the confidence to come up and say, this is what happened to me. So it's about creating a whole continuum. And not just starting with, it's good to start with policies because you have to start somewhere, but then you have to look at the implementation, you have to look at have you created the market and strengthened the market so that the children who we are programming for can respond, and then coming to the continuum of actually utilizing it so that it comes full circle. And so for me, that has been that's something that is what we are working on to ensure that we create that perfect environment, that environment where even if situations do arise, that we are responsive to them.
Nachawi, is it different in Thailand?
Okay, Thank you, Ingrid, and it's very honored to be here and joining this panel. Is it different in Thailand? I think we are facing the same challenges across the globe. It's the matter of how we approach this safeguarding may be different. And I totally agree with Rachel here in terms of the gap between policy and implementation still exists. The question to all of you, how do we get there? Some other countries have a fantastic policy, but there's no how. There's no how. How are we going to do this policy? So I want you to look back into your organization as a sport for development organization. Do you have child protection policy? If you do you have any particular tools, guidelines for those people to implement the policy? If you implement those policies, how do you know they're doing it every day? That keep the children safe in every activity that you deliver to the children and use in your program. It is very challenging, and Thailand faced the same thing. We're very lucky. We signed on so many CRC. We committed to it. We ratified in so many conventions. The problem is, in the field level, we don't really know how. So as a role of right to play, everyone saw the name. Oh, you're Article 31. So what's your role? We actually bring it to another level. We're not just supporting the sport and play, but in the daily activity that we do, children in our program need to know their rights. They deserve to know their rights. And the child protection policy that we have in Right to Play, it has to be their language. They need to understand the very complicated adult drafted document. They need to know what it is in their own term. And with what Rachel mentioned, they need to be able to understand themselves first, and then they can look after another, or one another, or their community. So in terms of Right to Play, I think most of you know, or some of you know. Raise your hand if you don't know who Right to Play is. Okay, I think everyone knows. Don't be shy. Okay, I guess I gave you a little glimpse of what we do. We're using sport and play to empower children to overcome adversity in their life. And we're not talking only sport, we're talking about play. In certain countries, particularly in Thailand, we're moving the playing field as a sport into the classroom. So it's very similar to what Magic Bus does. We use activity-based learning. And it's not only for physical education. Teacher will be teaching math, doing the activity, using the activity, and they'll be running around learning math. And in terms of safeguarding within that context, teachers need to be aware how do they behave in front of the children. What do I mean by behaving? How do you interact with the children? The language that you use, is it encouraging? Is it positive? Or it just bring them down when they can't accomplish something? And safeguarding in my context means, do you allow the children to be part of the decision making? Do they have the right to pick what they want to do, or you pick what you think is best for them? So this is another aspect as well in terms of safeguarding. I'm giving you a lot here in terms of the whole picture of safeguarding. It's no longer just protecting them from the abuse, or mitigating the risk. We're talking about the prevention. We're talking about everyday lives that they live with it. They are respected and with their own dignity as a child, as equal as everyone else. So I have a poem to leave with you, wrote by Leila Albert. She's a poet, she's an advocate, and she speaks through her poetry in a lot of ways about abuse and also domestic violence. Don't cry, okay? Be ready, get your tissue. I am a child who has been abused. I am a child who has been rejected by my parents. I am a child who has lost my childhood. I am a child who has many hurts. I am a child who needs love. I am a child who needs to heal. I am a child that wants someone to love me. I am a child that wants someone to help me. I am a child that wants someone to take care of me. I am a child that is someone. I am a human being. I am a child that wants to be abuse-free. I am a child who needs a family, a real family without abuse. The question back to you from this poem: what do you do in your organization to help this child grow and develop those things we talked about yesterday in terms of the benefit and the power of play that we hope to have it for them? What do we do to help them to create those safe, supportive, and non-threatening environment? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mary. So just so that Begu knows that we're not discriminating against him because he's the only man on this panel, I'm going to let him go next. Begu, specifically in your domain of education, how do you see that intersection between safeguarding and, for example, right to education?
Thank you very much. I think it's a pleasure to be here talking about my views, especially from a perspective of more positivity. I come from the education background as well. I look definitely, education is a great tool for development and supporting children for all-round development. And while I agree with most of them, I think the environment in which the children are and the factors that influence them becomes definitely critical. Somehow down the line, either it is with regard to the attitudes, beliefs, or with the way we have been dealing with children, I think there is need for us to look ourselves as to how we deal with them, or the type of experiences which I have been saying, or for that matter, the type of environment which is being provided. I think one significant step, even if you consider that there are many other issues, a great potential is, I think, schooling. Schools are the place where children are there, and then considering the fact that we assume that children be there for 18 years and children being the age of 18, I think that is one place at least, are we in a position to create the best learning environment or protective learning environment, I would call. Now that is where I think we need to much more look at significantly and look at what is that we are doing. Say for example, I'll take examples especially in India where we have a great law, the right of children to free and compulsory education, the act which has been enacted last 3.5 years back. I think if you look at the whole parameters, the issues around that, sport per se is integral part of that. The opportunities for the children to be provided for play and sport in child-centered and child-friendly education has been clearly and explicitly stated there. Now, having said that, what does it mean? What is that further? It defines that as we go towards implementation. We all talked about it's not enough to have a good policy. Even in India, you look at the National Curriculum Framework, which is the spirit of that, if you look at it, has such an inclusive perspective where it encourages for the flexibility and pluralism of the systems to accommodate all children. But the fact is that the policy, the law as such, is it enough? Now what is happening in the implementation stage? I think that is something which we need to look at significantly and we need to work on that. Now I would like to take an example here just to quote few of the data. Now in India, the enrollments are very good. School children especially is part of the thing. Most children are there. But probably we do have issues in relation to retention and the children dropping out. And then probably subsequently there are issues around children learning and quality education. Now added to that, I think we need to look at the protective learning environment. It is not just learning when we say in terms of numbers, it is the protective learning environment. Children being in school, are they safe? Are they protected? And the type of safeguarding which we are talking of, they feel safe, the expression, even in the classrooms they are allowed to freely express, and the teaching learning process is free of anxiety and mental pain. Now, what are we doing around that? I think to me, one of the medium as such, this is the place where I would see with a good child-friendly schools, and then children completing the quality elementary cycle, or for that matter, beyond the age of 14 years. We need to look at around that, and some of the examples I think whenever I see, I try to link with some issues around how sport can be a great tool for addressing these issues. Last 4 to 5 years, UNICEF also engaging with other partners in terms of using this sport as a medium to address issues of children as well as development. Just to give a few examples, especially we have seen, one of the issues which largely in education sector which has been addressed is children being to school regularly. Our attendance is a huge issue, and subsequently it affecting the quality education as well. Now, sport was something a great medium, by having a sporting sessions within the schools as well as, around that. We have seen that children being in schools regularly, as well as the attitude and beliefs which we are talking with the teachers there. I think it is not necessarily that we need to look at, the attitude and beliefs of the teachers also to support this environment. I think that is something which we need to look at it and work hard. And even some of the examples which has been worked out in different states, say for example in the difficult areas like Chhattisgarh, some of the schools were actually closed, and with sport as a medium, more schools have been reopened. And that's, of course, I believe there's case examples which in the breakaway sessions these have been talked of. I would like to say that this sport is really a great medium and to address many issues for development. And that also, can we have such an environment in schools which are integrated in the what we call as child-friendly inclusive classrooms as well. I think that itself is a major thing. I would like, as a way forward, if we are going to move forward, I will say 3 things. One, I think we need to really engage with the systems much more on a continuous basis and advocate and harness with them all this awareness, the beliefs, the change, the need for, making this difference, that sport can really make a difference even in protection of the child. All of us, actually, including with all the stakeholders as well, the system should work in hand as well as the other vice versa. I think that can move forward and once. The second thing is, there is always an issues about monitoring, strengthening, about when the data comes of the things which we would not like to see. How do we engage that? How do we address it immediately? Redressal mechanisms, supportive mechanisms. Say for example, I'll take the example of the RTE itself. Now we have what we call school management committee. That itself is a great opportunity. It's a mandatory body which supports for the school development plan. Can these elements can be incorporated and the school management committee be made more aware about these things and help at the grassroots level? And then come at the subsequently either at the state level, which the best way to strengthen SCPCRs and the NCPCRs, how can they work together? And then there is linkage with the child line and all those things. There is that need for convergence and working together at the grassroots level. Third, last but not the least, is this educational functionaries or the functionaries beyond education, either at the training institutes level or at the block level, block resource centers, cluster resource centers. Somehow, this cadre needs much more engagement. We have neglected for various reasons that while they monitor certain things, the issues around protection, the issues around need for looking at much more significantly of these things needs to be engaged in a much more significant way. somehow for various reasons, either because of fear, either because of not able to handle those things, you know, have a dumb ear, or for that matter, you try to do not see it properly. And can this be made much more visibly significant to work with these groups of people who can really make a difference? Then along with that, coupled the right kind of training attitudes, the programs, the curriculums integrated into the sports, I think this can be a great medium. Probably we'll look at this. Some of these things done in a more systematized, organized way. I think for the sustainability of the things which we are talking over a long term, it is important that systems as well as, you know, the civil society groups and rights organizations come together as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. Maria, you've operated this entire spectrum of activity from, you know, working with a company that had sports at its core, through to almost any aspect I can think of sports for development. So can you sort of start to pull this together now, join the dots for us across globally and across the different aspects of this problem?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay, is that better? I can use this microphone. I actually have a big, loud voice too. Is that better? Is that better? Okay. So I've set myself a very aggressive agenda, and hopefully my time starts now. Okay. So I need to keep you awake because I know you sat through 2 days of presentations. I want to add something new to the discourse, which is a new sector but an ongoing discourse. I really think in India particularly we should celebrate progress, because my first adventure into looking at safeguarding and gender inclusion came through ASAP a few years, not even 3 years ago. And at that moment, there was not very much in our sector here in India in terms of support for development, let alone on this topic. And globally, we should really celebrate progress. There is progress in our sector. There's a fantastic safeguarding group out of the UK. So I just want to put out there that we are progressing. And the fourth thing I wanted to do today was talk across the practitioners in this room, because there are those of you here that are funders and organizations. So my question to us is, and because everyone here is an expert, and I know you guys thought because I work for Women Win that I was coming as the gender police, but I'm not. I want to talk about what's next and how we frame this, and I want to challenge each of us to look at the scope of our influence in organizations. And what I'm going to talk about is really truly inspired by the organizations in India and the journey I've seen 3 years coming, and particularly to Magic Bus, who I have a long and rich history with from my time at Nike, and the other ASAP organizations. And I want to talk about how we actually move from the absence of bad, which is a lot of safeguarding. The conversation is about the absence of bad, to the presence of good. It is not the same thing. And I'm going to show you a kind of confusing diagram. I'm very into successful failures, so if I confuse all of you right before lunch, it's okay, because you'll at least stay awake. And I would love your feedback on this, but I have a theory which we can put up in my first slide. And it really comes from my time at Nike and how we tried to get after factory conditions. And to explain this slide to you, I think as an organization or as a funder, you have to make a fundamental decision much higher up in our own consciousness about whether you want to approach this topic of safeguarding, or what I would call inclusion, from a point of view of risk abatement. So if you look at the middle of that chart, there's a 0 line. That line is the line that most organizations draw, and beneath that line are all of the things we do around risk abatement. Does that make sense? Everybody with me so far? So these are things that you do to ensure safety, to keep on the absence of bad. And above that 0 line is a value proposition where you start thinking about some of these things like safeguarding and inclusion, about the presence of good. And my first point to you is going to be, think about how you're coming at this. And I agree with everyone here. Listen, we don't need more laws. We do need more practical things, but my God, how many more laws can protect children? and yet everything that's happening is indicating that there's a continuous gap in this. But if we think about our programs and we think about the most vulnerable children, and I am now going to be the gender police, and I tell you what we discovered in India, we've discovered everywhere. If your programs are inclusive of the most vulnerable children in your communities, the chances are the kinds of programs you will design and the kinds of people you will hire and the kinds of processes you will design will not pull you into a bureaucracy that is unmanageable of policing, but will create an ethos of organizations that actually think about how having the best safeguarding programs with the most inclusive policies become an actual value proposition that you can go to funders in other places. And as a sector, we need this, because as a sector, we need to make the link between the work that we do around development using sport as a tool and the results that comes through that. So if you're going to come at this from risk abatement, then please, by all means, quote the laws, get a policy, check the box, show your funders that you're doing a good job checking the boxes. But if you're brave enough and strong enough to come at this from what the presence of good could look like in your organization, you cannot exclude girls, you cannot exclude children with disabilities, you cannot exclude marginalized children, because if you're doing that, the message that you're giving to our own children is contrary to the development that we're doing. So, my challenge to our sector is, how do we move from this absence of bad to this presence of good? And I have 3 recommendations, but I would like to make a pitch for Thursday. There will be a working group where you're going to get to meet many of the people that are doing the fantastic work and are going to be able to share some ideas. So if you can give me the next slide, please. You guys aren't supposed to be sleeping over there. Okay, I have 3 suggestions about how we make this shift. I just told you the first. We need to start with the most vulnerable children, because honestly, if you have a program and you don't have girls, your safeguarding is going to already not be at the highest level. If you bring girls into the program, it forces you to look at clean bathrooms, safe spaces for children to and from. You automatically will get a heightened awareness if you include children with disabilities, mental or physical, if you include particularly disadvantaged children, that you need to think about all of the things to get them into your program and have your programs work. You will have leapfrogged many of the policies that probably will only be effective for certain types of children. The second is, stop. Policing won't work. I learned this at Nike. Listen, if we take an attitude of policing, we're working towards the 0.001% or 2% of bad practices in our own organizations, and all we can impact really is our own organizations. But if we work with the 98% of staff and teams that really want to improve their ability to be child-friendly and have what we talk about, an enabling environment and a loving environment, then focus on the 98% and not the 2%. So, you can create better policing mechanisms and you can sure make yourself look good to funders. That's not going to make a better organization. And I think a lot of the work in India, and I hope you go to the workshop on Thursday, has been very much about leapfrogging what has been a long history of a lot of hard work. And I don't want to at all discount or diminish all of the activism that's happened or all of the laws. We do need those. And I think what we need, though, now is more creative solutions, which brings me to my third point, which is we have to fail. If we're not failing with our processes and our organizations, I cannot think of a more important task we have at hand than protecting our children, but beyond protecting them, to creating an environment where they can thrive. If we're not failing, we're not trying very hard. Then we're checking boxes, and I tell you that's not enough, and that's not something we're interested in. So, what do I mean by failing? There's technology out there that we can use. We've created a drawing the line game. We've tried game technology. We can try so many things. We have to fail hard, and learn lessons. And we can't keep doing the same thing because it's not working. So in India, what I have known and come to love about India in the 10 years I've been coming here is that you, as a nation and as a people, can leapfrog. It happens in so many other areas. Let's leapfrog this safeguarding piece, and particularly in this, which is a very nascent sector here in sport for development, you can lead in the world. Because there's not a country out there, and it has nothing to do with developed, there's not a country out there who has a monopoly on figuring this out. So anyway, with that said, that's my last one, is fail hard, fast, learn, and share. And with that, I will turn it back.
I'm giving you the last word for this part of the session. You too can draw on a variety of contexts and a variety of organizations and a variety of experiences to inform this topic. So, over to you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to draw, first of all, on what my colleagues have said on the panels. I think there's a lot of really sort of interesting, meaty ideas that have come out from this. And I think one of the kind of real themes that I've picked up is this sense of inclusion, including children into your child protection frameworks, your policies, your safeguarding material. I worked a lot in Latin America, and I remember we underwent an exercise where the organisation I worked for was a charity that worked across 4 different countries, and we hired consultants to come in to help us pull together a child protection policy. Now, what we were given was a manual about that thick and told that's your child protection policy. And all the partners were like, what do you want us to do with this? And said, well, that's that. And they were like, well, how do we implement this? Oh, excellent, here's another manual about that thick. And it's not practical and it's not feasible, and we completely understand that as a ground level stuff, you do an incredible amount of work, and actually you don't have then the time to start sitting through a policy that thick and then start looking through the implementation guide and then to start implementing, your safeguarding and policies and your procedures. It's just not going to work. So I guess kind of what I'm sort of here to say really is that it doesn't have to be that thick. A child protection policy can be 10 pages. It can be something incredibly simple. I think we're in the world sometimes where we're so used to using jargon, we're so used to using kind of complex terminology, we're so used to sort of using 100 words when we can say in 10. That is what your child protection policy should be. Something very clear, something very straightforward that you can use across the organisation. And it should include absolutely everyone. The person at the security gate, for example, who's just looking after kind of the external things of the organisation, they need to be included in that discussion. As well as, say, for example, the cooks in the kitchen who may only have that contact for an hour a day when they're serving food to the children, they still need to be included in that kind of conversation. But then when we're talking about inclusion as well, it's including the children and making sure that they are actually at the heart of those discussions as well. One of the UK Sport at the moment is managing a piece of research which is looking at safeguarding in sports for development organisations, and it's including national federations, international bodies, grassroots NGOs, and I know a lot of you here at the, right now are actually involved in that piece of research. We're actually piloting 11 principles is what we're calling them at the moment, and they're kind of really basic things of actually what kind of sports for development organisations, any kind of sporting organisation really should have. And it's not rocket science, and they're not kind of complex things, but they're things such as having a child protection policy in place, things like having a procedure. So if a child was to come to you and say, my coach did this to me, what would you do? Rather than kind of being reactive and thinking, oh, actually, we need to start, pulling together a format for someone to fill in, just kind of having those things in place. But fundamentally, at the heart of this, should making sure the children know that this is in place as well. I've worked with a lot of organisations who have got some incredible policies out there, but when you talk to the children, they're not massively sure about what's there in place. They know they're protected, but they don't know, for example, who they'd go to if they have a problem. They don't really know what should happen. And actually, that's really, really important. And just to sort of draw on an example in Latin America, when after this consultant finished giving us this incredibly long, huge manual, we decided to actually just kind of scrap that, and we went back to the drawing board. And actually one of the first exercises we did was actually pulling together a group of children and saying, what does safeguarding mean to you? How can we as an organisation protect you better? And ultimately, they are the experts. They know what it is to be looked after. They know what it is to be protected. They know what it is to be able to come to an organisation, play sport and feel safe. And this is kind of, something really fundamental. And so from this, we developed, say, a child-friendly child protection policy. So taking that manual of yay thick, reducing it to an organisational policy of about that thick, and then a child protection manual of 3 pages. And this was something that was in pictorial form, which was then addressing kind of the needs that we had a lot of illiterate children in the organisation. So it was making it accessible, but then actually really getting them involved in that journey as well. So things like asking the children to sort of induct the new arrivals, rather than me sitting down saying, okay, these are your rights and this is how you can be protected. Nominate some of those peer leaders. I know a lot of you work through peer leaders. Nominate them to actually sit down and explain to them what their rights are, how can they be protected, what should us as an organisation do. That way you're constantly involving the children around you, and it doesn't become just an organisational policy, it actually becomes a live policy, something that is very much inclusive. It's not a manual that kind of ends up on the shelf, dusty and is never used. It's really actually something that's very much alive and as part of the organisation as well. And just to finish, because I know you've been listening quite a lot to us, but just to kind of reiterate the fact that safeguarding, it is a huge, huge task. It can be broken down, and there are lots of organisations out there that are really actually acknowledging that it is something very fundamental, something that is incredibly complex, but there's a lot of resources out there now to help. And that safeguarding is ultimately a journey. Once organisations kind of reach that kind of standard and they get that stamp of approval, it doesn't mean it ends there. There's a lot more that needs to be done, and organisations should never really be complacent that, if they've ever got a badge of approval from a, say, government ministry or an independent safeguarding organisation, it shouldn't end there. It really does need to continue. And as I said, by involving those children in that journey, you really will kind of help to kind of keep changing that policy and ensure that you're responding to the changing context as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Poonam. I mean, that's really quite a wide spectrum of experience that you just got. But now we haven't even begun to touch on some of the new threats. I mean, we're seeing, for example, the rise of cyberbullying. We're seeing the rise of online sexual predators of children and so on. So it's, as Poonam just said, it's literally a very rapidly moving target when we talk about safeguarding children in a variety of environments. But now it's your turn. So if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment or share your own experience, just find a mic. I believe there's people that have mics. Find a mic and tell us who you are. Tell us what organization you're with, and then if you want to address the question to a particular panelist, tell us who you want to answer that question.
Good afternoon. My name is Hồng from Football for All in Vietnam project. And actually, I have 2 parts. First is about sharing, and I also have the question. I'm very happy to hear all the sharing from all other organizations doing about child protection policies. And we actually also have child protection policies in our project. And we actually make it really practical, because when I study all the child protection policy from the government, then I was so surprised. I had no idea that we have those child protection policy, and it's so in detail, and it really think why no one know about it. So we make it into 15 pages, and we also include good practice for community to read that, to understand that if they in that situation, how can they not? And we also have the math at the end of the child protection policy to show the people if they have made those abuse case story, how do they report and who they approach, and if those is the welfare officer, how they have to go through any agency to get that. And then we also see that it's not only the children, but it's also the awareness of the elders, of the teachers, parents. Because when I went to the field trip to the football tournament, then I see that in front of me, the teachers hate the child just because he's naughty. And then he should look at me because I observed that situation, but I couldn't do anything. I feel outside of because in our society, then if I just go to tell him that do not do wrong now, you abuse the children, then they will take it really offensive because they are older than me and they are also a male. Then they think that they are more experienced and they don't want someone like younger than them, also female, teach them how to do the thing in their life. So we have that kind of policy now, and we see that it's not enough just to give out the policy. It's also like how to train the people, how to get there with them. We also have the peer leader trainings called for the young girl from around 6 to 15 years old to make them like spread the information around the community. And so that is for my sharing, and I have the question is that because I observe that like what I know is that there's a big number of the people who cannot read here. So how can you like make the policy to read those people because they cannot read? So how can you? And the second question is that and I see that it's because you said that it would be more safe to get more girls to play. Is it not that safe if you don't have like women and girls in that playground? But I see here it's extremely unbalanced about gender. I know it before when I came here, but I still get so surprised. I get so shocked, and then I see. So did you do anything with that? And if yes, so how can you manage to make the situation better? Because I saw that I went to the metro station, and there is one like the food carrier is just for only women, and I see that it will be for human safety to protect us. But when I went inside, then I just thinking in mind, is it a good or sustainable solution for a long time? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take a few questions and comments before we start to respond to them.
Thank you so much.
And try to keep it as concise as possible so we get as many, as much participation as we can.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Derek. I work with Beckwood International Leadership Development in Ghana. Derek. And I think Tao just took some of the things I want to say. I'll be very brief. We would observe that institutions and other interventions like SPC, among others in the society, are all human construct. These are things we've constructed and created in the society. And in the same way, some of these constructions and interventions are contradictory, or they fight each other. Why am I saying this? My program, Beckwood International Leadership, collaborates with a wide range of organizations, sports development organizations in Ghana. And I think Right to Play is one of the organizations we work with often. And there was an incident in northern Ghana, a very rural community, where this young girl, excuse my language, was raped by the uncle once. And I think Right to Play was in the forefront. They noted it after organizing some programs and games played for the community. We intended to report this case to the police station, but nothing worked out. We tried and tried, nothing worked out. This lady got pregnant, gave birth, and then after some years, the uncle raped this girl again. And the funny part of this story is that he did this in the cemetery, the second time, on the tomb. We tried again, and then the community rose against us. It rose against us. And why am I saying this? This is a very good intervention response for the SPC, safeguarding and protecting children, and it's so passionate. And you need passionate people to lead these interventions. And the community simply did not agree. And just like she was saying, traditions, culture are some of these things that we have created, and fighting or contradicting some of the interventions that we think we deem fit in these time of the world. So I think the panels have spoken very well, excellently well, engaging the children. Rachel spoke about the children being their own and advocacy, and Achawi is speaking of the fact that sports and SPC should be incorporated in every organization. But the problem is, how do we involve other agencies of the community, the family? Opinion leaders are the people that we should involve, because if their children, if they told their children, don't go with this organization, don't go with this, obviously they'll keep mute. All our reporting was null and void because the child involved was not willing, basically because it's been told it's your uncle, and in our culture this don't allow us. So how do we try to tackle these things, especially when traditions, customs don't allow us. Thank you.
Thank you. Lady birthday. Oh, okay. No, please go ahead.
My name is Parul Shet and I am from Gujarat, a grassroots organization called Saisho. We work with children and underprivileged children and youth in the slum communities. I have two major concerns or questions. I totally agree with Chandaji about the attitude of adults and the structural violence that we are propagating as society. Particularly, even though we have the right to education in place, there are hardly it is properly implemented. Like we have it's mandatory to have the committee in any organizations where there are women to protect the women. But there is no child protection policy in schools or in the organizations which are dealing with children. How can we make sure that we have such policy where children are involved and where at least half of the committee members are children themselves, including half of them are girls. So how can, as the practitioner, we advocate for that? So that is one thing that I want the panel, expert panel to comment on. And the second thing is that even though we totally agree with the fact that the sports and the games are extremely important for the total holistic development of the children, but either in the community or in the schools we have not provided the space or opportunities. Forget even about the material or anything, but there is no space in the schools. There are no teachers to teach the children or expose the children. Like we working in the slum communities, and one of the major research that our children did and that the major concerns that the children have come up with is that they don't have any space to play. There is no children's space in the community. So when we are not even providing them anything in the schools or in the communities, how we are going to encourage the sports and the total development to a large and a massive underprivileged children. Of course, in the big schools and all those, the playgrounds, it's there. But there, again, as some other mentioned, that there is so much of pressure of studies and the sports are considered like, most neglected extracurricular activities that is not encouraged by parents, by teacher or by society. So how can we address these issues?
Thank you, Parul. We'll take one more question from that lady there and then we'll come around for a second round.
Hi, my name is Rashi and currently I'm a student. I'm a fellow at the Young India Fellowship. The question that I just wanted to ask to the panel is, we were all talking about protecting children from adults, but what about protecting children from children? Because a lot of abuse, bullying, etc. happens between children. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to start addressing these questions? Maybe I'll start with you, Begul, to take on the India-specific parts of these questions.
I would take two of them which are related to some of the issues what one can do with especially safe space for play as well as the issues around RTE. I agree with that, as we have been talking about having the policy, having the law, that itself do not suffice us, but the need for more advocacy, the need for creating a space for implementing this, that it itself becoming more viable and more important. Definitely there are issues around provisions, what has been laid down even in RT not happening in reality. That's something which itself, the RTE compliance schools, if you look at the parameters of how schools becoming RTE compliant, and one aspect is having a playground and subsequently the support material and even the part-time physical instructor where the upper primary school can have. Now these are at least certain basic things which has been envisaged. the issues are around still not happening these things. Now I think that is where I think either with the existing mechanism of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan program, which says that funds needs to be allocated and needs to be tapped at that level. One, we need to constantly work with the district level functionaries or the block education officer functionaries as to how, when this is a mandate, I think why is this not happening. I would give one example where there are, I believe, colleagues from Maharashtra. In Chandrapur, I think either Basant or Mayur is there, who would also tell probably, where they have been able to work with the district magistrate to get, appointment of physical education instructors as a part-time physical instructors to begin with, and also working with communities to make the safe playing area. One is like working with the systems, whatever the best possible. There is another angle in terms of tapping about other, either with regard to the PICA, the program Panchayati Yuva Khel Krida Abhiyan program that actually is being implemented. Also other programs of other ministries or other departments. The problem is that how can we engage in a more convergent manner and come out with innovative ways of doing. There is no one answer or solution to these type of things, but definitely one, knowing all these things, the possibilities, and then like some of the states wherein these things are happening, the exchange of these ideas and innovations to the forums of this kind where this will be presented also will become a good example to see and go with the talking to the people concerned and possible ways of getting this. That could be one way of looking at that. The second aspect, especially, what is the best way actually, when things are there in terms of policy, even a law in the policy, why does this not happen? As I said, somehow the same understanding and the spirit with which we engage all stakeholders along with the communities and helping them to accelerate in one voice is something still missing in Sport for Development. The voices of children along with the people, there is a need for it. I think somehow doesn't come around that, and then that simple aspect of mobilization along with acts are not sufficient, that action is required. So we need to get into that mode to make this happen.
Thank you. Rachel, I'm wondering whether you want to tackle the question of, the traditional practices, societal barriers, power structure that we've heard from Ghana, from Vietnam, and of course everyone in India grapples with those every day. Do you have any advice on how to take those on?
Yes, that's the question that I was looking forward to tackling because it's very relevant to where we work. We work in Kilifi, which is a very rural part of Kenya, and so a lot of the challenges that we face include backlash from the community when we try and implement, and sometimes there are views that we are imposing these notions of children's rights. And it's especially the example that Derek gave and also what Tao gave is that our notions of what child protection includes may not necessarily always rhyme with what the community expects. And we have to, one, be prepared and understand that we are coming to change a system and therefore that will happen. So do not be surprised and do not be shocked. Be prepared. And two is to say that there are definitely strategies that you can use, and one of the ones that we use is to have parents and community meetings, where these issues that we discuss, these issues that we consider to be extremely important, and that are not just in our policy, but are ingrained in our everyday programming, we have monthly meetings. We call them tumanyanes, which in local language means let's get to know each other. And what they are is basically we put out, in whichever community we are working in, we put out a call and we say, Sunday afternoon, everyone gather at this space. We're here to talk about our girls and the issues that they're facing. And so you say to the community, like, what are the challenges you're facing? And then immediately, the conversation is like every place we go, it's like there's a prepared script because all the challenges are the same. It's early pregnancy, children being victimized, and all those, and challenges with education, safety and security, all those issues come up. And then we say, what do we think we can do as a community to safeguard our children? And you will find that there are those who will say we should use the law. There are those who will say we should use traditional norms and practices. But then having that that public discussion about those issues usually will be a reinforcement for you when that one girl has faced that challenge. And so partly it's to say that yes, those traditional set mindsets exist, but it's our role to challenge them. For as long as they result in our girls or our children suffering abuse, it's our role to challenge them. But two, also to have an approach that's community-centered, and therefore when you need backup, when that one girl, that one situation arises, the rest of the community there will be those who will still speak that way. But then you can be able to raise it at the next meeting and say, this is happening, what can we do, what can we be more responsive? But also to recognize that in each and every of these countries that we work, there are cultural norms and then there are legal norms. Sometimes you're caught, that is a situation where you're caught between the two. And it's upon you to have, and sometimes the backbone, and in many ways to fight against the system, like the follow-up that you've described doing, which is what it takes to be able to sort of push the system towards the principles that you believe in, and in some ways to use the law itself to protect their rights.
Let's take, if you want to... maybe we'll take a few more questions. This gentleman here.
Hello, yeah, I'm Abdul Qudus Amini, working as an educator in Afghanistan. So, we are working with the kids under 18 years old. We have lots of child policy We have lots of child protection policies. For example, we are taking care, like giving transportation to girls, to bringing them in our facility, because we want to protect girls coming to our facility on the way. Boys shouldn't tell them anything, or they shouldn't do like some kind of talking. For example, our environment is very safe, very nice environment. During Girls' Day, only girls are allowed. During Boys' Day, only boys are allowed. So we have made lots of process according to lots of strategies. But the problem is, but when the kids are going back, mostly we are working with the kids who are working on the street because of the war or because of the uneducated families, which they have to earn money to support their family. And in some cases, we are just getting stuck. Like how we should make decision now. For example, maybe you guys have heard the name of Human Rights Office. For example, in my country, when a girl and a boy is in love, they're going to court, but the court is not listening to them because the community is saying, no, they shouldn't get love married. But they're going to Human Rights Office. The Human Rights is making possible this thing, then a boy and girl is getting married. Or for example, a husband and wife has a problem. Their family, their relatives will not let them to go to court because it's not good for the community. But for example, the wife is facing lots of problem in her husband's family. Then she's by like lots of, should I go to Human Rights Office or I shouldn't go to the Human Rights Office. But at the end she's going to Human Rights Office, then they're getting sorry for my English, then they're getting divorced and then they're getting separate from each other. Still, there's a community, there's a government. Is there any third party available for the child right protection who can protect the kids? For example, if we are protecting our students inside our facility, I can guarantee you nothing can happen inside if the children is inside our facility. For example, if the children is getting out of the facility, we cannot control that issue. Or is there any third party who can, if the government is not listening to those children, is there any third party available for making any kind of decision? Thank you.
Okay, one last question from
Thank you. My name is Ari Koivu, coming from Finland. On Liike Sports and Development, we have programs in East Africa, mainly in Tanzania. My question is, now when we are in the Next Step conference, so we're talking about the past and a little bit of the present, but I would like to have a question about the future ideas. In many developing countries, sport as a subject is in the primary schools, sometimes also in secondary schools, but it's very often related to personal skills or social skills, like sports and social skills. So when going a little bit forward, do we have any common understanding or any ideas for the future where we can put our strengths together in order to have an impact on also on the curriculums, for example at the teachers' colleges, so that this kind of a safe environment, child protection through sports can be already included in the whole system of the society? Because there are tens and tens of different organizations doing their own bits and pieces in the business on these related issues in various countries. But if we would have a common understanding and get all the regional officers from the education sector into one table in different countries, so could we find out, for example, that this kind of child protection policy through sports could be part of the curriculum in the teachers' colleges, then it naturally would go into the primary and secondary schools, and within about 10, 15, 20 years' time, there would be a significantly different attitude towards the child protection through sports.
Thank you. What I'm going to do is I'm really going to go right to left now, and I mean, if you could sort of sum up, make your final remarks, but also use the opportunity to address any of the questions that you've heard.
So I'm not qualified to answer either of the last questions, but what I would say is a couple of things I heard in the discussion that I think are important. And Sarah, I don't know who else is going to be on Thursday. I think to have a good working session, please come Thursday, because the discussion we're having here is probably most appropriate in smaller groups and context specific. And I love the future question. But things that have come up for me in this discussion are, I think we don't invest enough in training of the first line duty bearers in sport for development. And so there's a lot of question here about what our scope is inside the program, which we all clearly understand, but there's a lot of gray area. And I know from girls and our experience working in India and other places, when girls come to the coaches and tell them something is happening, not in the program, but at home, or in a place that's very vulnerable, and the coaches come from the communities, we are ill-equipped and are ill-equipping, and it's unfair to our coaches, not for them to solve it, but to understand and have very clear process about what do I do with this information, how do I respond, and who do I pass this along to. So more investment in training of first-line folks. We need to create ecosystems, and I really heard that, and I would say, intrasectoral and cross-sectoral partnerships. We need to get our own sector more and more aligned. Then we need to reach out to women's rights organizations if there are sexual health or reproductive services, places that work with children who've been abused. There's Child Helpline, and I think really doing a really good job of mapping the ecosystem around your program and who you should be talking to on a regular basis. And the third thing, to the gentleman from Ghana, I think that's a conversation with Magic Bus. I think sometimes when you really are facing either harmful traditional practices or, I agree with Rachel, it's time to challenge that. But, I go back to my first point. If that program is a boys and girls program, pull the program out, because you'll have the boys then saying themselves, actually, no, this is not good. But if you stay and we allow abuse of one child in one program, and the community, doesn't make a stand for a child, whether it's a marginalized child, an illiterate child, a girl child, a child with disabilities, and we don't take that stand, then I think it's a slippery road. And I know our experience has been the moment that organizations say, either in the case of Magic Bus, we won't come into the community until you bring a boy and a girl, or a young male and female coach, and if the community doesn't live up to these standards, we pull the program. You'll make allies out of all of the boys, I guarantee it.
Do you want to address the question specifically about the human rights organizations and what the options are when law and culture conflict?
Actually, it's very difficult to give a recipe, but I think what you're doing is excellent. There has to be, in every situation, not just in Afghanistan, but anywhere, there has to be a facilitating agency or an NGO that will link the community with the system. And it's not easy. But I would like to also comment on 2-3 issues, but very quickly. One issue that I would like to say, which comes out very clearly, is that working for children is a political question. It's not. It's both ethical and moral and political, and it's a power battle. And I think that is why I talked about equality. Fighting for equality is a power battle, and that we will have to be very clear about. And when we are taking the issue of a marginalized child, a girl child, here we are actually defying the existing authorities and structures of power, even the tradition and culture, we are defying. And in resolving the conflict, we are creating a consensus. The process of resolving a conflict is a process of creating a consensus in favor of children. I mean, these are very large things that I'm saying, but I think it's important to know what we are doing actually. What we are actually doing is resolving conflicts in favor of children, and through resolving conflict, we are creating a dialogue. We are winning over stakeholders, we are winning over teachers, we are winning over what Rachel has said, many stakeholders, and also even what Maria has said. And how do we sort of win support in favor of children in resolving the conflict? So we must think of it as a battle, but then not like other battles. Here it is possible to change mindsets. We start with the assumption that it is possible to fight tradition and create new traditions, create new cultures. That is what Rachel has talked about. How do you create new culture? You can't live in a society with tradition, without culture. But here we are talking about creating new traditions, new cultures, and resolving conflicts in favor of children. And finally, I think I would go by Begur. I should think the key is education. Without education, I would think that protection still remains, largely a great compromise. A child's fate is sealed if there is no education, and if there is no right to education, and if they are not in a school. If they are in a school, they play, they sing, they dance, the possibilities are immense. If they are not in school, they are left unprotected. So I would go for schools, education, and anchoring every other issue around education, which means even noon meal program. Everything comes with the institution of the school. And I think we must talk about school and protection together and not as two separate issues.
Poonam, any last words?
Yeah, just to address the question from the Vietnamese NGO, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name. I think we need to just probably move away from the fact that a child protection policy has to be written. It doesn't have to be at all. A child protection policy can take any form you need it to be, as long as the children understand it and the organisation understands it. So for example, in your case in terms of the illiteracy, so for example, a pictorial form of a child protection policy would work really well in terms of making the children aware of the child protection policy. That can be done through music, that can be done through drama, it can be done through dance, any kind of sporting activities as well. Asking a child to sort of sign up and say yes, they understand their rights, that can be done on a video. It doesn't have to be kind of anything written. You can be as creative as you like with it, as long as ultimately those children understand what their rights are in the organisation and how that organisation will protect them. You have an absolute blank canvas in terms of how you want to do that. In terms of your question, Derek, in terms of the sort of rape of the girl by the uncle, I think Rachel answered that beautifully, and what Maria added as well. Just to give you an example of our work in Zambia as well, we've one of the projects that we work with, before we do any kind of work, it's securing buy-in from the community and actually ultimately from community elders. And again, some of the projects are kind of going up, tackling quite sensitive issues, things like gender-based violence, things like sexual abuse, for example. And there's such delicate topics, and as you say, communities, and it can almost, without that conversation with the community, it can create that immediate barrier for that organisation to kind of break through without their engagement as well. So I'm sure that's something that you're already doing as well, but kind of the moment you have that buy-in from a community elder, it actually really does help to then just start slowly having those discussions, and then you do start sort of seeing those changes. And then just lastly, Parul, you mentioned about how to go ahead with having those policy discussions in the first place. I think the best thing to do with the committee would probably be go onto the website, pull off a copy of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of the Child.
Of course, going against it. But we have to do it. It's our duty of care to ensure that what we commit to do, we are doing it. I know that we cannot save the world, but we put effort and a lot of dedication to it. I know that the solution and the end point there is not as what we hope, but we are doing it. And one thing I want to add to that as well, that we're not alone. We have other support from other organizations. As Right to Pay, we're not an expert in child protection or safeguarding, but we reach out to others. We work with the community, local, community-based organizations that work with that community. We work with the government who create this policy to support the work in the field. So you're like a bridge. The bridge goes up there, down here, and make it work. It's not easy, I can tell you, but its work has to be done. And another point, I want to end with a very good note with the gentleman from Finland. Actually, in Thailand, in the past 7 years, we've been trying really hard to advocate for sport for development. Sport is not a magic word in Thailand, unfortunately. So we use a different term. We use play, we use activity-based. And last year, we just signed a 5-year memorandum of understanding to integrate activity-based, play-based activity into the curriculum. And it's a good news and a bad news in a way, because we are the only organization that's supporting the Ministry of Education to do this work. There's 25,000 schools in Thailand. We cannot do this alone, of course, but at least we have something in the paper saying that children will be able to enjoy learning in the classroom, learning math, science, social science, or art, or whatever, and enjoy that beauty of having fun in the classroom. And also with the Ministry of Justice, that we work with the youth who have conflict with law as well. We also signed a memorandum of understanding, and we use sport and play as a way and a tool to rehabilitate those youth, to help them become a better person in that facility. And when they go out, they have a certain aspect of life skill that won't bring them back to where they're at today. So I would just want to leave it like that. Thank you.
Thank you. So to loop this back to where we started from, our children are facing an unprecedented level, I think, of threat, and old threats, new threats, entrenched power, entrenched beliefs. What you've heard today, what I've heard today, I've learned a lot, is that we do have a lot of the ingredients of what we need to combat this. But clearly we need to do much more working together, much more convergence, much more collaboration, and I'm so grateful for platforms like this that allow this to happen. Thank you very much. Thank you to all my panelists.